This iPhone 17 Pro Max is probably unlikely to replace any of my cameras anytime soon. However, using an iPhone in your workflow, especially if you're working in production, especially if you're working on filmmaking, there's going to be apps that are going to make your life a lot easier. In fact, I found like 5 or 6 of them. In today's video, I'm going to talk about my favorite apps on the iPhone 17 Pro Max and actually, honestly, any other phone, except there's a little bit of nuances depending on the phone you're using. We'll get there. Now, this was going to be a video that was going to have a lot more on set of me talking to you on set, but I kind of tore my hamstring, so I can't really go very far. Now, the first app is going to be the Blackmagic Camera app, and I mentioned this in a previous video talking about the iPhone 17 Pro Max, but I think this is one of the best apps that you can get, especially if you want to integrate this into your workflow. Now, as somebody that actually uses Blackmagic cameras, I will say that the menu system on these cameras are actually incredibly easy to use. You have all the manual controls right there on the screen, and in your back-end menus, they're incredibly easy to follow, they're easy to figure things out, and also coupled with the iPhone 17 Pro Max's cameras, I think it's not necessarily going to replace the camera you're going to be shooting on, but at the same time, when you need something like BTS or you need a filler shot for a particular project, I think using the Blackmagic Camera app still gives you that manual control, while at the same time, it's still going to have great image quality. It also has a bunch of different exposure tools, so you could use things like zebras, your false colors. You also have your ISO control as well, where you can go all the way down to like 50 ISO, which a lot of cameras can't do, while still using log at the same time. Speaking of log, you're also going to be able to access the ProRes log that's going to be on the iPhone 17 Pro Max, which is something that's going to give you a bit more flexibility in post, especially if you like color grading your footage. There's also a bunch of cool features on the Blackmagic app, which probably deserves its own video, but that's going to be my number one. Now, if you're somebody that likes location scouting, or you're somebody that's shooting outside in natural light and you want to figure out where the position of the sun is, this app's incredibly easy to use and it's also free. Now, Sunseeker is an app that I use all the time, and basically what it does is it actually helps track the position of the sun based on the day that you're shooting on, and also gives you some insights into future shooting dates. This is really great if you're a commercial director, commercial cinematographer, or you're just planning a YouTube video out months in advance, because you can go into a 3D view and the different lines that you're going to see on the 3D view are going to give you where the sun's position is going to be at different times depending on the date. Obviously, it's going to have yours, and it's actually going to track where the direction is if you're shooting on a particular day, and that's going to be that yellow line. But if you want to figure out things that were 3 months ago or 3 months ahead, you're going to be able to do that on the Sunseeker app. This is going to be something that's invaluable, because if you're someone that needs natural light, or at least to know where the sun's going to be, this is an accurate way of being able to check that out, instead of just going to the weather app and finding out what time the sun rises or what time the sun sets. Now, we just talked about an app that works really well when you're shooting outdoors, but shooting indoors, it might need a little bit of work as well. Now, this app is incredibly useful, but also it's going to be a little bit annoying for one reason. Now, the Kelvin Meter app is going to give you the ability for you to use your phone's camera in order to read the color temperature in a particular room with actually having the house lights inside of it. A lot of the times, house lights are going to be like 3,300 Kelvin, sometimes they're 45, sometimes they're 5,600 Kelvin, and sometimes they also have awkward tints to them here and there. However, you're going to be able to use this meter in order for you to figure that out, so you can set your lights in your camera accordingly. The only kind of problem with that is that this app isn't actually free. It's about $14.99 Canadian if you want to get it for a lifetime, which isn't the most in the world. However, that is going to be a little bit annoying, because most of the apps you want to use in your workflow, you kind of want to have them be free. Now, the next one is free to download. It's necessarily free to use. However, it does have a pro version in it, and also had a lot of improvements from the previous version. Now, the fourth app I'm going to talk about is going to be Milanote. Now, Milanote is a great way to organize your video projects. It's a great way to actually have something called a production Bible that you could bring to your next shoot, especially if you're working on client projects. But up until this point, the desktop app and the iPhone app looked a little bit different. On desktop, it was a lot easier to access different things like my mood boards or some of my shot lists, or even some of the budget breakdowns that I have for certain projects. And if I used it on the iOS app, it just didn't look the same, and things were a bit more harder to access. The way that you would scroll through some of the menus just didn't work out for me. But Milanote added a new update where the iOS and as well as the desktop version look pretty much the same. I do have my iPad in order to use Milanote and use some of the features that are on it, because it was a lot easier to see. It had bigger screen real estate, and as well as I could use the browser version that gives you all of the capabilities that you would have on desktop. But now you could do the same thing on your phone, and having an iPhone 17 Pro Max with this gigantic screen is an easy way for me to see different things that I might need, especially when I'm working on my own client work. And number 5 is going to be your camera company specific app that you can use in order to enhance your workflow. You're also going to have camera control apps, like Sony has a camera control app, Lumix has Lumix Flow, and as well as Nikon has an app as well. So that way you could change a couple of settings in your camera. You can move your focus point around depending on which app you're going to be using, and you can start and stop recording. Now, speaking of camera apps, one of the ones I find that's really unique, which is kind of exclusive to Lumix cameras, is actually going to be the Lumix Lab app. Now, I've talked about this a couple of times, but the Lumix Lab app gives you the the ability to not only download a LUT and actually transfer it to your camera, but you can create that LUT on your phone, adjust things, send it back, or send it to other people. You're also gonna get a library of different LUTs from other creators that you could try out in your own footage. You could also use a real-time LUT feature on your camera in order for you to bake a look right in. This is gonna be very similar to using the Blackmagic app and having LUTs in there as well, where you can embed the LUT into your footage and not have to worry about grading. But in terms of your workflow, being able to do that and pass it around your Lumix cameras is actually pretty useful, especially if you're on the fly. And last but not least, and I mean, this one's going to be a paid app, so I could see how this is going to be annoying for some people, but it's going to be Artemis Pro. Now, if you're someone that's into filmmaking, someone that's making money in your video production, these are just going to be business expenses that you're going to deal with at the end of the year. However, Artemis Pro gives you the ability to emulate the look and the focal length of particular lenses, so that when you're location scouting and you want to see how something's going to look before you actually do it, it's going to make your life a lot easier. For example, if I'm using something like the Diesel Vespid Primes and I want to know what they're going to look like in a particular situation while I'm location scouting, I'm going to be able to do that without having to pull my camera out. Now, keep in mind, this isn't going to be one-to-one. My iPhone camera sensor isn't going to have the same sensor as an Ursa 12K or a Pixis. However, you are going to get an idea of what a shot is going to look like to make your life a little bit easier, and it makes it easier to communicate to the rest of your team exactly the things that you want. But just keep in mind that you do have to pay for it. Now, those are my top 5, or technically top 6 plus apps for the iPhone 17 Pro Max, and honestly any other iPhone, that might make your workflow a little bit easier if you're into filmmaking or photography. Now, leave a comment down below which apps that you use to help you out in your own workflow. Everyone's gonna be a little bit different. Some of these apps are free, some of these apps are paid, but overall, I use these guys all the time for my projects. That being said, I'll just see you guys in the next one. Peace. Hopefully I could walk. Let's try walking. Maybe never mind. Never mind.